Hi, my name is Victoria Esposito. I'm the Advocacy Director for the Legal Aid Society of Northeastern New York. And I'd like to thank all of you for being here with us as we hold our first ever virtual town hall. Today's topic, and this is the first of a series, today's topic is COVID-19 and money, because that's a concern we've heard a lot of. That's something that we think is going to be crucial for our client base. And I'm going to take a moment and have our panelists introduce themselves in alphabetical order. So Amanda Ahrens, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what your area is?
Yeah, of course. So I run a nutrition outreach and education program. I help people get SNAP benefits by applying, pre-screening them to see if they're eligible. And I also help with any barriers or issues they come across while applying or reapplying for SNAP benefits.
Thank you so much. And so we're all talking about the same thing. SNAP is what used to be known as food stamps, is that correct?
Formerly known as food stamps, yeah.
Excellent, thank you. And alphabetically, next we have Ioana Kostadinova-Dencheva. Ioana, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I am the Economic Justice Staff Attorney at the Saratoga Springs office, and as such, I deal with unemployment insurance benefit cases. I represent people at hearings and appeals, and I also represent at fair hearings concerning denials or discontinuance of public assistance.
Thank you. Michael Telfer?
Hi, I'm Michael Telfer. I'm a senior attorney with Legal Aid's Albany office. I represent clients who've denied their applications for disability benefits in hearings, in administrative appeals before Social Security, and in federal district court.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, Elizabeth Woods.
Hi, I'm a senior attorney at the Legal Aid Society. I work on the reentry project, but I also spent several years working on public benefits issues, and I still provide technical support in that area, mostly temporary assistance, emergency assistance, and SNAP issues.
Thank you so much. I'm going to do a couple of housekeeping matters before we really get into the meat of the panel. Number one, attendees, you're all going to be muted throughout because we have nearly 200 of you. And as you can imagine, it could be bedlam otherwise. So what I'm going to ask you to do, if you have a question, then please put it in the chat or question box, which should be in the control panel at the right-hand side of your screen. Also, those of you who submitted questions ahead of time, thank you very much. We've incorporated those into our discussion. And one cautionary note is that if there's something that is legal advice, all we're doing today is really information, which is just an overview of the facts, okay? If you're asking for something that is very specific to your situation, that is legal advice, which we're not able to do today. But if you look at the information after my name on the screen, you'll see our website and also our COVID legal line number. And you can certainly access us, you can certainly check for information on our website, or if you need to speak with an attorney about your own situation, you would call our COVID legal line, which is 833-628-0087. I think that's everything. So now on to the meat of what we're talking about today. We've heard a lot about stimulus payments, and that's something that many, many people have asked about. Mike, I'm going to turn to you first. Let's say someone is in receipt of either SSD or SSI benefits, and I know you're going to tell us a little bit about that. What, if any, effect does the stimulus payment have on those benefits?
All right, so I'll back up a little bit and explain the difference between those two. So SSI is, they're both disability benefits, SSI and SSD, due to someone's inability to work. So SSI is based on financial eligibility and disability, while SSD is based on disability, someone's work history, and how much they pay into the Social Security system from their paychecks. So the effect, I'll start off first with how someone receives the stimulus payments. So there's an automatic individual payment of $1,200 for people receiving SSI and or Social Security benefits before January 1st, 2020. So when I say Social Security benefits, I'm talking about SSD benefits, which are the disability benefits, retirement benefits, which are old age benefits, survivors, widowers, and widowers benefits, among other benefits. Anyone who got those benefits should have received an SSA 1089 form, which is a tax form detailing Social Security benefits. It's different from SSI benefits though. So if you were just relying on the fact you received Social Security benefits and SSI benefits before January 1st of this year, you'll receive the $1,200, the individual payment, the same way you would normally receive your regular payments from Social Security, whether by direct deposit, direct express debit card, or by paper check. But if you need to enter additional information about your children or your spouse, you're going to have to go to the IRS's website to do so. And go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Mike. I was going to ask, is there a deadline to do that?
Yes, for SSD benefits, if you were on them and you need to enter your children's information, the deadline passed. That was April 22nd. If you didn't make the deadline, you have to file a tax return in 2021 to receive the $500 payment per child. For SSI benefits, though, that deadline is tomorrow. So anyone receiving SSI who received it before January 1st, 2020, they have to file on the IRS's non-filer website by tomorrow to receive the $500 payment per child. If they don't do it by then, they will have to file a tax return next year to receive those payments.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, I think I cut you off there.
No, all right. Yeah, so I was going to say, also, there's another way to receive payments besides just relying on the fact you receive benefits. If you file tax returns for 2018 or 2019, those lead to automatic payments. This way will be by paper check or by direct deposit. If you don't have direct deposit, you should sign up for it. If you don't have a bank account, you should also sign up for a bank account. And then anyone receiving Social Security benefits, again, that includes SSD and SSI, beginning in 2020, they have to file on the non-filer page on the IRS's website. So it's irs.gov. You can find it that way, or you can Google IRS and non-filer, and that will bring you to the IRS's non-filer website. And then the other thing, if you have to enter non-filer information for you or your children, you don't have the option of direct express to be paid. You're limited to check or direct deposit. And then the other question we had was how does it affect someone's receipt of benefits? So Social Security has said it will not be counted as income, so it does not reduce someone's amount of benefits or count as income to affect someone's application of benefits. Where it does count, it counts as a resource, and there's a timeline for this. So it's counted, and I'll explain what a resource is in a second. The stimulus payment won't count as a resource for 1 year from receiving it. After that, it counts. So Social Security benefits don't have a resource, but SSI benefits do. So the SSI limit is you can't have over $2,000 in resources for individuals or more than $3,000 for couples. If you do in a month, then you won't receive SSI in those months. So resources or assets is another word for it, such as cash, bank accounts, a second house, a second car. There's a bunch noted on Social Security's website. And then the other question too is how it affects benefits is for kids cases. So children can receive SSI benefits. So as I noted, it doesn't count as income, but it does count as a resource. So a parent's income, their resources affect the child's receipt of benefits. If the parent has resources, then the child's SSI benefits will be affected. So if the money's not spent in a year from receipt, it will count as a resource, which can potentially knock the child off of SSI for the month year over resources.
Thank you. And I'm going to turn now to you, Liz, because my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that when you're applying for temporary assistance, you have to think about both income and resources to determine whether you're eligible. And can you tell us a little bit about how the stimulus payment will affect people's eligibility for temporary assistance generally?
Generally, the stimulus checks won't count as income for temporary assistance purposes, and they won't count as a resource for the month received for 2 months. So it's unlikely to affect somebody's eligibility for temporary assistance purposes.
And is there Okay, I'll come back to you on that in one moment, because I think we all have questions about how best to apply for temporary assistance at this point. But is there anything else we should know about the stimulus payment from your perspective before we move on and come back around?
It also, for emergency assistance purposes, doesn't count as income or a resource. So for temporary assistance or for emergency help, it shouldn't affect your eligibility.
Thank you so much. And Amanda, I'm going to ask you the same question with respect to SNAP benefits. Is this something that people need to be concerned about? If they get the stimulus payment, will that affect their eligibility for SNAP?
Yeah, so if they are applying or already have SNAP, it's not going to count as income. Where it will count and potentially hurt people, I guess, is if it's you have a resource test, which is generally people who are 65 years old or older and are above the income cap to qualify for SNAP. So they can still qualify as long as they have under $3,000 in resources. And so if it goes above that, then they could potentially be cut off SNAP benefits.
So it sounds to me like there are three slightly different definitions and three slightly different timelines for income and resources for SSI, temporary assistance or emergency assistance, and SNAP, and that's something people are going to want to be aware of. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, and the resource won't be counted for the month that you receive it. But the month after, if you still have any of the stimulus payment left in your checking account, the people who have that resource test, then that will be counted against them.
Thank you so much. And Ioana, I'm going to turn to you now. I know you said that one of your primary areas of practice is unemployment benefits. May I assume you've been getting a lot of calls?
Certainly, we have been getting a lot of calls. Yes.
And can you tell us first, what extra, if you will, unemployment benefits are available for people right now?
Right. So right now, unemployment benefits have been expanded in several ways. First of all, normally under New York State unemployment law, you have to have lost your employment through no fault of your own, and you have to have at least $2,600 of earnings for each qualifying quarter in order to qualify for benefits. Under the CARES Act, there is an extended category of applicants who can apply for benefits with New York State, even though they would traditionally not be eligible for such benefits, such as people who are self-employed, people who are gig workers, people who did not have enough earnings in order to qualify for unemployment assistance, as well as various other categories such as farmers, people who are directly impacted by COVID-19 and thus voluntarily left their employment. And there are several other categories that are outside of the normal eligibility, and people can certainly find that list on the Department of Labor website. In addition to the extended eligibility for people, there is also an additional benefit called pandemic unemployment compensation. Thus, anybody who is eligible either under state law or under federal law for unemployment benefits additionally should get a $600 payment per week in addition to their regular amount. Another way that the unemployment benefits have been extended is that a claimant who is eligible under either state law or under federal law would also receive additional 13 weeks of benefits on top of the 26 weeks, which are the eligibility weeks under state law, which of course results in a lot of claims.
Thank you so much. And Ioana, we have a question specific to PUA. The question is, I'm getting a lot of, let me pop that right out, make sure I get the exact wording. I'm getting a lot of clients asking me about eligibility for PUA based on reduced hours of employment. And can you speak to this?
Yes. So eligibility under PUA, if your hours have been cut, hypothetically, because of a COVID-19 related reason, then by all means, people would be eligible just based on the pandemic reason. However, anybody who works more than 3 days a week or earns more than $504 per part-time week would be excluded from benefits. So in order to get PUA, that criteria under state unemployment law would still apply. So by all means, they could apply, but they have to keep in mind that they will have to certify how many days per week they work and how much they make.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to stay with you for just a minute, but I'm going to bring this question back around the rest of the panel. So please be thinking about it. We've been reading a lot in the newspapers and seeing it on TV about the great difficulties people have been having in applying for unemployment. What have you seen as far as that goes? And what are some best practices when people apply for unemployment?
We have received a lot of calls from claimants who are currently awaiting approval on their claim, or who simply cannot get through either through the telephone system or through the website to actually submit an application for benefits. We have been assured by the Department of Labor that they are working on those claims. I would suggest to anyone who is having a hard time to just keep trying perhaps through the website, because it's easier to just send a message saying what's going on with my claim rather than stay on hold for an extended period of time. We are aware, unfortunately, of long delays, and we hope that those will be resolved soon so that claimants can actually receive their benefits.
Thank you so much. And one last question before I move on. There was a request for you to repeat the name of the name of the program under the CARES Act that provides the additional $600 per week.
It's pandemic unemployment compensation.
Thank you so much. And Liz, I'm going to turn back to you. I know a lot of people are probably needing to apply for assistance in ways they haven't had to before. What issues are you aware of with people applying? And what's the best way to apply for benefits right now in this age of social distancing?
Sure. So given the current situation and social distancing requirements, to apply for benefits at the Department of Social Services, it can be done mostly remotely now. Districts are accepting applications by mail, by fax. Some have set up email addresses. Outside of New York City, we don't have an app right now. There are also in-person interviews are waived, at least for now. So I would strongly encourage people to contact their local Department of Social Services to see what remote application options are available to them. The districts also have to remain open and keep a physical office open. So if someone isn't able to get their applications in by other means, electronic fax, mail, or what have you, a lot of departments of social services have set up drop boxes so that you can still have a contactless application. And they all have to have workers on site. So if someone does have to physically go to the Department of Social Services, there are people there to assist them. I would recommend contacting the Department of Social Services to see what accommodations or remote options are available, because obviously if you can avoid going down to the Department of Social Services, it's probably better for your health. And if you do go, of course, I strongly recommend wearing a mask. It's not required if you're medically unable to tolerate one, but I do encourage people to work with their Department of Social Services to see what can be done to keep them safe when they go down. There have also been some changes in documentation requirements. For instance, normally when you apply for temporary assistance, you may need to get documentation from your employer as to why you're no longer employed, of what the circumstances were, and when your last pay was. Those requirements have been relaxed. A lot of people can't get documentation from their employers right now, and there are a lot of people who unexpectedly lost their employment. So the agencies are supposed to take your word for it if it can't be backed up. They also have access to a work number system where they can look up when people were last paid and get that information. So another thing that's changed is, of course, the in-person interviews, as I said, can be done by phone mostly now. And for instance, original documents like a birth certificate, which you may not be able to get right now, a copy will be accepted until the next practical time that you could get an original document to submit. So given these changes, for most benefits, it is possible to apply without having to physically go down to social services. But if you do need to physically go down there, or it's easier for you and best for you, that is still an option. Processing timeframes haven't changed, especially for emergency assistance. The same-day decision is still required. So that's something that's remained the same. The processing timelines for family assistance and for safety net, which is mostly for individuals or folks who've been on for more than 60 months, those timeframes, the 30 days and the 45 days, are still in effect. But if you have an emergency or an immediate need that you need addressed, they're still supposed to help you during your waiting period. So there have been some good changes. Also, in-person work programs have been suspended. Sometimes you have to attend those in order to get your case open. So nobody is being sent to in-person programs right now because of social distancing requirements and the governor's executive orders.
Thank you. And I have two quick follow-ups, if I may, Liz.
Absolutely.
My first follow-up is, you mentioned a variety of ways that people can put in their application, from drop boxes to email. But you also suggested that people should call their particular local DSS. So that leads me to the question, are all the DSS offices throughout the state handling this the same way?
From what I understand, they do have some discretion and flexibility given their resources and their staffing. It's not required that a district have a Dropbox. I know a lot of them do. I know that some districts who are not HRA down in the city, they have an electronic app where you could submit applications. Some districts have set up designated email addresses for people to submit documents by email. Some haven't. So I think it is important to reach out to your local DSS and see what your options are, especially if you're trying to avoid going down there for your safety and the safety of others.
Thank you. And
there are guidelines, but it's not uniform.
Thank you. And the final follow-up I have before I leave you in peace is, what is practice for someone when they're applying? Do you have any recommendations generally about keeping documents, copying, that nature of thing?
Absolutely. And I mean, this was true before COVID, but it's especially true now. Whenever you apply for benefits, you should always keep a copy of everything that you sent in and keep documentation about when you sent it. So if you're sending something in by mail, I would, if you can afford it, I'd recommend doing some sort of tracking on that. If you use the Dropbox, there has been guidance that they're supposed to send you a receipt within a pretty quick turnaround. I believe it's 24 hours. If you're sending it by fax, keep your fax receipt. Email, that'll keep a record of itself. You should always keep track of what you've applied for, what you've sent in, and that way, if something goes missing, you can verify when you sent it in. And it's a good way to do this, even not during the situation that we have. But yes, I'd recommend always keeping track. And if you use the Dropbox option, the receipt's not immediate. So I would just somehow make a note to yourself of what you sent and when.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And Amanda, I'm going to ask you essentially the same question. What are best practices for application for SNAP right now? Has that changed? What is the process like in this moment?
So Liz pretty much covered it pretty well. The faxing, if you're able to either buy like a phone app or something like that. You can do email at foodstamps@albanycounty.com. You can mail them. Again, I would keep copies or make sure you have some proof of sending it. You can go online at the My Benefits website as well. Some people are having a little bit of issues with that. So I do recommend giving us a call for additional help at this time. Paper application is probably the best by mailing it in or either dropping it off if possible. Whatever you're comfortable with or able to do. As far as applications being processed, they still have to have staff at the building processing this and getting back to people as quick as possible. Processing times are still the same as Liz indicated. As far as work requirements as well, those have been suspended for a little bit, or even if you have to do online job searches, they're recommending you don't go out in person, but you rather go on to the Department of Labor instead and try to look up some jobs there to kind of meet those requirements in the meantime. Also, as far as recertifications, those have been pushed back. If you had to recertify for March, April, or May, they've been extended for 3 months. If you had to do a periodic report form in those times, they have been waived, or they can be waived or don't have to be processed for 6 months. So that gives people an additional time who either can't find the resources to complete those recertifications or report forms right now. So that's kind of nice as well.
Thank you. And I have one quick question that's in follow-up to something you said a minute ago. You mentioned work searches, work requirement. And has that changed at all during the pandemic?
Yeah, like I said, that has been kind of suspended right now. People who are able-bodied without dependents or have been laid off or can't find jobs, typically you only get SNAP benefits for 3 months. If people were kicked off of SNAP previously for not meeting that requirement, they can also reapply right now as well until the pandemic has been lifted or the work requirement goes back into place. So you'll continue getting benefits. You're welcome.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And Mike, I'm turning now to you with essentially the same question. Now, I know that SSD and SSI are a little bit different in that you have to be able to get those benefits. However, keeping in mind that you're talking about a discrete population there, is anything changed as far as the application process goes?
Yeah, so local offices are closed to the public right now. People have to call Social Security for any assistance or see if what they need can be done online. So online appeals can be done as well as applications can be filed. Social Security's website, ssa.gov, has a lot of guidance on what they're doing. And they also have a little chart for children's payments. So I recommend checking that out because there's a lot of different scenarios for children's payments. So it's very helpful, I would say. With applications, there is a possibility they could be delayed right now. So what's going on is IMA appointments are canceled. Those are in-person doctor evaluations. IMA is an organization paid by Social Security to evaluate people and give opinions on their limitations. Those are called consultative examiners. It's unknown if this in-person cancellation will delay application decisions. And there's also a concern with getting people's records due to offices' resources being elsewhere to deal with the health crisis. Hearings at the Office of Hearings Operations at Social Security are still happening, but there's no in-person hearings. There are only phone hearings. You don't have to agree to a phone hearing though. You can decline them and then do an in-person hearing when those are back. However, these are case-by-case decisions because people need to think about whether they want to appear in person or not. There's also the delay could be a couple of months before in-person hearings start again. their ability to get records, and a lot of other factors to consider before either consenting or agreeing or declining a phone hearing.
So what I think you're saying is that the person should think about whether it's in their best interest to have a phone hearing. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Okay, cool. Thank you. And let me just pause there for a minute before I turn on to another panelist. I know there are a number of ways to access Social Security. For example, they have a website, they have a hotline, a nationwide toll-free line, I should really call it. Has the way that those various services process queries or problems or issues changed at all?
So there's a couple of things they're not doing right now. I'll explain those. So they're not starting and completing any current medical continuing disability reviews. Those are reviews for people on disability benefits right now. The exception to that is if you're waiting for a hearing on that kind of issue, and you're not receiving benefits, your hearing will be scheduled. Where possible, they're suspending the processing and collecting of overpayments as well. And I'll note they're not doing, like I said, they're not doing in-person meetings anymore at the close to the public, the field offices, the local offices. So you will have to just call or just see if you can do anything online. But they are available in the office. There's working remotely. There's a few people in the office a couple times a week.
Thank you. And one really last follow-up, but are there any kinds of issues that are getting priority within Social Security?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say there's a couple ways to rush someone's case. They're called dire need or critical care cases. If you qualify, your case can be rushed and decided faster. So let's give a couple of common examples. Someone's terminally ill with a terminal illness that will cause their death, unfortunately. That is one way to possibly rush a case. Veterans following October 1st, 2001. And the impairment occurred while on active duty status. So as anyone who served in Afghanistan, the war on terror, or in Iraq, or people we normally see with that criteria. Someone's homeless, they're facing imminent eviction or foreclosure with no means to go elsewhere. So if you can Google dire need and Social Security, it'll give more areas. So if anyone meets any of these criteria and the others on Social Security's website, you should tell Social Security immediately, and they should hopefully be able to rush your case for a decision.
Thank you so much. And Ioana, I'm going to turn back to you now. You just heard Mike talk a little bit about the hearings and how those are in the SSI, SSD world a little bit changed and what's going on with those. What about with unemployment? I know we said that there's just been this flood of people seeking unemployment. What can people expect once they've filed their application?
Once they file the application, the claimants can expect to receive a determination, usually within 2 to 4 weeks from sending in the application. That's of course in ordinary times. We're hoping that there won't be considerable delay during the pandemic, but we really don't know. If anybody receives a denial saying that they're disqualified from benefits, either for the state unemployment insurance or for the unemployment insurance under the pandemic unemployment assistance under the CARES Act, what they should do immediately is log into their unemployment account with the Department of Labor and send a secure message requesting a hearing if they do think that the determination is incorrect. Right now, all hearings have been put on hold, and that hold started back in the middle of March with the New York Post and the executive order. Our understanding is that hearings are going to be commenced soon and that all hearings will be held via phone. So it's even that more important to request a hearing as soon as the person hears about a denial, because currently there are several thousand hearings in queue, and this number will also possibly grow as more claims are being denied.
Thank you. And that's, I suppose, to be expected. What about in either the general temporary assistance or in the SNAP worlds? Liz or Amanda, what are you seeing as far as hearings if someone's denied?
Do you want me to go first? Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
So starting in March, the Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance, which is the state agency that oversees the administration of certain benefits like temporary assistance and SNAP, started a pilot program to do remote hearings. So people are still able to request fair hearings and have them heard. They've been ongoing. They're mostly by phone. I think some districts may have video capability. So there are certain procedures for submitting your evidence by fax or by email. You know, it can be done remotely. If someone still wants to have an in-person hearing, they can. Or if they're unable to participate by phone, for instance, not everybody has unlimited phone access, an in-person hearing is still an option. The Office of Administrative Hearings is accommodating people sort of on a case-by-case basis, given whatever the situation is. But people have been able to have successful phone hearings to enforce their rights without having to endanger themselves by going somewhere in public where they could be exposed to COVID. So that's still going on. You know, if someone has an emergency, they still have a right to call an emergency fair hearing, which would be expedited. So the process is still up and running.
Thanks, Amanda. And I know you deal primarily with the application part, but what can you tell us about the about what you know about hearings in the SNAP arena?
I haven't heard too much other than what Liz actually said, so haven't had to deal with too much of that, luckily.
Okay, great. And we do have a question for one or both of you. The question is, if someone has never filed for public assistance before, could one or both of you explain how long a family has to wait, number one? And number two, are all applications during this time considered an emergency?
I can only speak for SNAP. An emergency for SNAP assistance would be somebody who is going to receive less than $150 for the month and has $100 or less in resources. Or if their expenses as far as utilities and housing, possibly childcare and medical expenses are going to be more than their income for that month. So those are just two ways you could possibly qualify for expedited. And that means that it would be processed within 5 days. Anything else will be processed within 30 days of receipt of the application submission.
Thank you. And Liz?
So for a family who's never been on assistance before, if there are minor children in the household, the application could take up to 30 days for the ongoing benefits, but not every case is considered an emergency. But while you're in that 30-day waiting period, if you have an emergency, they're supposed to address your immediate needs. So if you're without food, if your utilities are disconnected, if you're facing homelessness, even while you're waiting for your case to formally open, you can apply for help to address your current situation if you have an emergency.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I have a question that I think could probably go to Ioana as well as to you, Liz, or you, Amanda. The question is, hang on one second. I had it one moment ago. What about if people are in a vulnerable population, they don't have a computer? How are they expected to do job searches, whether it's for unemployment, whether it's for SNAP, whether it's for some other program? What's out there for them?
So if someone is applying for temporary assistance and they're disabled and they're not able to work, there's a disability review procedure people can use where you would inform your worker that you're unable to work, and they would send you for a medical review, and you could try to get an exemption from the programs. Even if you're able to work part-time, but because of COVID, you have limitations in what you can do. Again, they're not supposed to be sending people to in-person assignments right now. They could give you a work from home assignment. And if you're not able to complete that because you don't have a computer, that would be good cause for not doing it. I recommend staying in contact with your worker if you have an issue and see what accommodations they can give you. But the Department of Social Services is supposed to be understanding of the current social distancing requirements and limitations. And, you know, if you're given a homework assignment that requires a computer and you don't have a computer or internet access, that would be good cause for not completing it.
Thank you. And Amanda, I know you said earlier that the work requirements have been temporarily relaxed, but let me ask you the same question for if and when those work assignments go back, work expectations go back to where they were. What if someone simply does not have access to a computer or some other mechanism?
I would recommend, again, getting in contact with their caseworker, like Liz said, for the latest updates. As of now, it's just either suspended, waived, or an alternative method until May 15th or until the month of the pandemic or stay-at-home order has been lifted.
Thank you. And Joanna, it's my understanding that people who are waiting for unemployment have to do job searches, or who are, in order to certify for unemployment, they have to do job searches. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
So let me ask you the same question. What if you've got someone who's on unemployment or has applied for unemployment and doesn't have access to a computer or something else where they can search safely for employment?
Right now, it is my understanding that based on the federal guidance, New York State has relaxed the requirements for search for work and employment activities. However, I do suggest that if somebody actually claims unemployment every week, they reach out to the career centers. There is a phone number on the Department of Labor website that they could find, and that number should also be on the notices that they receive. So if they don't have access to a computer, they should call that number and see what other ways the career center might be able to assist them, either by referring them to an agency or perhaps a job fair. If they do have access to a computer but they don't have internet access, it is my understanding from what we hear that the local libraries still offer internet access at the parking lot locations, so that if anybody is in need of internet, they could use that. Under the regular regulations, they're only required to do 3 internet, I'm sorry, not internet, but any kind of work activities within a week. So whether it is applying for 3 job postings or perhaps viewing a fair, I would suggest that people just keep even a handwritten log of what they're doing as far as unemployment searches. Generally, the Department of Labor has been, I wouldn't say lenient, but not particularly stringent in their work requirements. So as long as people keep a log, that should be sufficient. And of course, there is the concept of good cause for failure to comply with those requirements. So if somebody is indeed in a dire situation where they can't reach a phone, they can't reach the internet, they can't use a computer, perhaps just keep track of what's happening, and they could potentially, if they're disqualified for failure to comply with the work search, they will have an opportunity for a hearing where they could present evidence to an administrative law judge as to their good cause to not comply with those requirements.
Thank you very much. I'm sure a lot of people are going to have those questions. And I have another question for you, Joanna. The question is, if a part-time 1099 worker's regular gig is discontinued and they apply for pandemic unemployment assistance, can they accept work while they are waiting for their claim to process or for benefits to begin flowing?
If they accept work while they're waiting for their claim to be processed, they should call the Department of Labor and let them know how many hours they have worked, because that would affect the amount of benefits they receive as well as their eligibility. So there is no difference between a W-2 worker and a self-employed or a 1099 worker in terms of part-time employment. So if they have certified for the previous weeks that they were completely unemployed, but now they start working under their gig perhaps for a few hours, for that week when they actually start working, they should certify that they've only worked part-time or whatever the situation might be, because making a misrepresentation to the Department of Labor could potentially, both under state unemployment and under the PUA, could lead to fraud charges and disqualification. Did that answer your question?
I believe so. I'm sure the questioner will follow up. Oh, and we have a note here that people with disabilities who cannot fill out applications or don't have a computer can call the Independent Living Center of the Hudson Valley with contact information. So that's another option. Thank you. And this question is specific to people who get SSI and or SSD. The question is, I have a lot of individuals asking when they're going to get their stimulus check. When is the deadline to send them out? And this person is saying, right now I'm telling people to wait, but when do I know that action needs to be taken? Mike?
So anyone receiving Social Security benefits, those checks started going out the end of last month, so honestly last week. Anyone receiving SSI, the checks we were told, according to Social Security, were going out early May. So right now it's early May. They unfortunately did not give specific dates. I would say what I've been telling my clients is maybe about 2 weeks from the date they were supposed to, like, I guess anyone for Social Security benefits, so they're supposed to be sent out end of last month. I said give it about 2 weeks to see if you get your payments. For anyone on SSI, I would say give it to like mid-May and then see what happens. I would check the IRS's website to make sure their information's, you can check get my payment. You can see the status of the payment as well.
And I have 2 quick follow-ups on that, Mike. I know there are some news reports, and you may or may not have further information. There were some reports that paper checks are going to take significantly longer than direct deposit. Is that your understanding?
Yes. So we've been telling clients to definitely do direct deposit if they can, because paper checks, my understanding is they're doing these in waves. So a direct deposit will be a lot faster. They'll go raise your bank account instead of waiting for a paper check in the mail.
And the other follow-up is I've heard at least anecdotal reports of some trouble with the IRS website. Are you hearing those also? And is there any other recourse?
Unfortunately, yes, I have personal experience with that website as well. There is a lot of trouble with people, I've heard, just being able to get their information. Right now, as far as I know, there's not a lot of recourse. I think we just have to wait for just stuff to happen with the IRS, unfortunately. But we do have our COVID hotline for people to inquire if they're experiencing any issues though.
Thank you. And that number again is right behind my name, 1-833-628-0087. We have just about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to check the question panel very quickly. And one follow-up, the person who asked the question about emergency, and this is for you, Liz and Amanda, really meant that, let's see, when I had asked about public assistance / food stamps, is the emergency status during the pandemic COVID-19 considered the same with COVID as a regular emergency? So I think, and questioner, please let me know on the question pane if this is different, but I think that what this means is there anything different about a COVID emergency in the world of temporary assistance or SNAP than there is in a regular emergency when we're not having a pandemic?
As far as
Okay.
SNAP benefits, I have not heard anything. It's just being processed the same if you have that emergency like I described earlier, or the 30 days to process.
So for emergency assistance, before COVID, there was still a very quick time frame for processing. If you have an emergency that day, you're supposed to get a decision that day. So that hasn't changed. Emergencies are still what they were before COVID. Lack of food, lack of utilities, lack of shelter, things like that. I don't believe that category has expanded due to COVID. If you have a specific question about whether something's an emergency or not, I recommend calling our hotline to get some advice about your specific situation.
Thank you so much. And I have one more temporary assistance related question that's going to go to you, Liz, and then I'm going to ask you each to think of one or two things that you really want people to leave this panel with. So the question for you, Liz, is, let me make sure I can get back to it. Is DSS going to offer any one-shot assistance under the during the pandemic?
Yeah, when I refer to emergency assistance, I know a lot of people call it a one-shot deal. Those programs are still operating. There's also a moratorium on evictions, which I guess will be covered on in the next town hall, is it? But if you do
yes.
Okay. If you're facing a housing emergency, for instance, even if there's not an eviction going on right now, if you're homeless and you need help with a security deposit to move, yes, those programs are still up and running. Whether you're going to get one or not, you have to meet all the different criteria for emergency assistance. There are several different things you have to meet to qualify. So yes, you can still go and apply. You can apply for emergency assistance through these remote options, or if it works better for you, you can physically still go to DSS to be seen. And if you have questions about that, or if you get denied and have an emergency, again, I recommend calling our hotline to get some individualized advice on your particular emergency situation.
Thank you so much. And Liz, as long as I have you on the hook,
Sure.
so to speak, what one, maybe two things do you hope that people walk away from this understanding or knowing or just taking to heart?
I'd like people to remember that these programs are still there, that they're still operational. There are remote options that you may be able to use if they work for you. If not, you can still go and physically be seen. You still have fair hearing rights. Fair hearings are not canceled. You can still get emergency fair hearings if you have an emergency situation. You can still ask for a hearing with aid continuing if you're on benefits and you're facing a reduction or a discontinuance. So you still do have those rights. And while COVID has changed some things and made things a little more complicated in some areas, these programs are still up and running, and I strongly encourage people to keep a paper trail, keep track of what you send in, keep an eye on your time frames, and stay in contact with your local Department of Social Services. From what we've seen, a lot of local districts are really trying to accommodate people. They're also trying to reduce the numbers in their waiting rooms for their safety and the safety of the community. So I encourage people to see what options and accommodations are out there available to them, given social distancing in the current situation.
Thank you so much, Liz.
I know that was more than one thing.
It was a couple things, but they were important things.
All right.
Amanda, what about you? What do you hope people leave this with?
Yeah, I would definitely like to echo Liz in the fact that, like, Department of Social Services is really trying to work with people. They're definitely more lenient on things. The face-to-face interviews, you know, are pretty much waived for right now. Most people can just do a telephone interview for their recertifications or applications, which is really handy. Some Interviews can actually be waived as long as you turn in all of your verifying information, which is another great thing right now, depending on the Department of Social Services area. And I mean, reach out to us at Legal Aid for assistance. I mean, things are a lot harder right now, but we can make it easier as well.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Ioana?
I would suggest that anybody who has been unemployed or perhaps underemployed, regardless of whether they're an employee or perhaps they were a gig worker and self-employed, if they feel like their employment situation has changed because of the COVID-19, they should be encouraged to know that there are benefits out there for them and to apply. And of course, if somebody is denied and they need assistance or advice, they can always reach to us.
Thank you. Mike?
I'll say a couple of things like Liz, but I'll keep them short. So I would say one important thing is the disability benefits, like the DSS benefits, are still there for people. These cases are still going forward, so that's important to spread the word about that. The other thing I've noted from speaking to clients and other people in the community is a lot of misinformation about the stimulus payments. Most adults will be eligible for repayment. They just have to file on the IRS's website if they don't get automatic payments. So I think spreading the word about that and just suggesting people file on the IRS's website to see if they qualify. And lastly, I would say we're open for business. We're working from home right now due to the health crisis, but we're open to still helping people as much as we possibly can.
Thank you so much. Mike, Ioana, Amanda, Liz, thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. I know these are some of the big questions we're seeing. A couple housekeeping notes. There were a couple questions that popped up that were actually about housing. As Liz alluded to, that's actually going to be the subject of a later town hall, so I skimmed over those. That's actually not our next one. Our next town hall is 3 o'clock this coming Friday, May 8th, and that's going to deal with domestic violence. We'll have a managing attorney, Susan Gagnon, and a domestic violence advocate from Catholic Charities of, I'm going to get this wrong, Delaware, Otsego, and Schoharie counties, Angela Smith. So we're delighted to have them. And then 1 week from today, Monday, the 11th of May, we'll be having a landlord-tenant town hall, which will feature Tara Glynn, who's a senior attorney from our Plattsburgh office dealing with landlord-tenant matters, and also David Crossman, who's a housing attorney from our Albany office. We may have one more that's still in process, so please watch this space. And again, if you take a look at the screen, you can see you can get information from lasnny.org/COVID. Or you can call our COVID legal line at 833-628-0087. Thank you so much for being here. This has been our first virtual town hall, and we're excited to have had you. Have a great week.